I develop a typology of nightmares to try to classify these on the basis of their meaning. Now, when a Jungian uses the word meaning, meaning doesn't simply mean the definition of something, nor does it only mean the significance of something or something that's particularly significant. There's another idea in Jung which I find very important when I consider meaning, which is something like the old word portend. What does this particular psychological phenomenon portend? It's the word purpose. Jung felt that everything that happens psychologically has a purpose, has an intention, as if the unconscious were an intelligent other agent that has an aim or an intent, or as Jung usually said, a purpose in presenting some peculiar phenomenon to us, whether it's an anxiety or whether it's a strong infusion of interest in something we've never taken interest in before. We'll see if I can't get it across to you by showing you some nightmares that have been created for us by great filmmakers. I want to start with a clip from Alfreda Hitchcock's Vertigo. The central character of the film is played by James Stewart, who represents very much a man in midlife who could almost be described as modern man in search of a soul. The opening sequence of Vertigo could be seen as one of Scotty's bad dreams. There's something very Freudian about that opening sequence. You have a dark-skinned shadow figure who might represent someone who has acted out an unacceptable impulse, in other words, an id figure, and you have the policeman representing a superego. You have Scotty in plain clothes representing an ego figure. So you have an id, an ego, and a superego handling a chase atop roofs, all on the horizontal level, far from the ground. The figure we're going to identify with, the only one we know, is Jimmy Stewart, and he's clearly a man in his 40s. He's not a young man. Life lived on the horizontal plane, in which you spend most of your time trying to stay on top of your shadow so that your ego can get its best work done with the help of the superego, is pretty much what the first half of life is like, particularly from a masculine point of view. So we're looking at a kind of classic hero chase drama. At just around that time, in one's 40s, that whole scenario gets a little bit old. The superego has a way of sort of dropping out of the picture. It stops motivating us in the way that it did when we were young. We don't any longer just want to do everything right and succeed at every point. At that point, the ego and the hero begins to give way as the whole point of existence to something deeper. And then one really finds a difference between consciousness that is ready for depth and the kind that isn't. The encounter with the self that comes up and strongly after midlife requires an ability to relate to the depths, to the ground of one's being. And for some of us who've been living at the high-achieving plane, we may not be particularly prepared for the experience of depth. It may be quite disorienting for us. Scotty hasn't a clue. He looks down, he's disoriented, he's far from the ground of his being, and he's absolutely panicked. He is by no means ready, and in fact, all he can see is a precipitous fall down into the depths. That is his nightmare. This kind of nightmare shows what the next stage of development is like for a psyche that isn't prepared for it. It's terrifying, it's scary, and it seems often to move people who have such a nightmare to come and seek help. The point is that the nightmare brings up all the anxieties attendant upon the next stage of development, asking the ego to do things the ego doesn't know how to do. And so the anxiety is feeling that one isn't prepared. It's a little bit like the examination dream, where you're about to have a test and you're not prepared for it. We've all had that dream. And in a sense, that's the way life is. Life is always presenting us tests that we're not yet prepared for. That's what development is. That is what I think this kind of nightmare is doing.